All right, welcome back to WBRC Now. I'm joined by Dr. Josh Klapow, a clinical psychologist, and on Instagram, The Mental Drive. And today we're talking about couples and maybe some of the tensions that they face during the holiday season. I'm sure you hear about this a lot.
I'm married. Are you married?
Yes.
A little bit of tension.
Just a little bit. And it was funny, I was actually talking to a couple people just yesterday. One issue they brought up is they felt like at times, one mom specifically told me last night, she says, I'm making all this Christmas magic happen for our families, and I just told my husband I'm tired. She's having to wrap all the presents, bake all the cookies for the kids' Christmas parties, and she just felt like she was carrying a lot of the weight.
Yes, and you just said she feels like she has to, and that's a false assumption, and that's the problem that we get ourselves into, and typically within couples is somebody is carrying most of the weight. They don't feel that it's fair. They maybe throw some hints out there a little bit, and then just it gets to be irritation and resentment. And in reality, it's not a simple solution, but it is as simple as saying, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm not going to do. And I think particularly with things like decorating or cookies or stuff like that, if the spouse is not doing anything, then you ask them to do it. And if they don't, then you allow it not to happen. And I know, I can't because we got the kids. No.
Right.
You allow it not to happen. Kids get upset, and then hopefully spouse rises to the occasion. And if they don't, you've still set your boundary. You have to do that. Otherwise, what you're telling them is them, sometimes it's him, that you're going to do everything. You're telling them that you're going to do everything. You don't need to.
Yes. And you had a good post about that on your Instagram page about the setting the boundaries. Do you recommend doing it that way, or maybe starting with a conversation with the spouse?
It always starts with a conversation, and I think sort of a dividing up of responsibilities, because there are a lot of assumptions about kind of who's going to do what, and a lot of times with the way people get out of things is they just start getting kind of passive. So yes, conversation. This is a potentially a big task, and so we're going to divide. Here's what you're doing. Here's what I'm doing. And it's so funny because we, as couples, we do that all the time on, who's taking the kids here? But holidays is this, we get really weird about the holidays. It should be treated exactly the same.
Well, mentioning that, another issue that might come up between couples is how much time do you spend at your parents' house versus my parents' house? What is your advice in handling that type of a conversation?
Well, I like your recommendation, and it's critical. You have to talk about it first. Do not wait until the invitation has already been, sent out, and particularly if you're traveling, and then at the last one, I don't really want to spend 3 days, I only want to spend 2 days, and you've already committed. So have the conversation on the front end. And I think a lot of times people don't want to do it because they don't want to have a fight, which gets into the whole point, and I had this on my Instagram point, expectations. This doesn't happen magically, even though we want it to. It doesn't happen magically without communication. There's going to be some tension, and that's okay. It's much better to have a little tension now than a giant argument later.
That is true. And then another topic that I thought about, and I guess I'm just going off of my experiences with my husband as well, and my family, but, how do you determine, setting a budget? Some families give a lot more gifts, and especially this is for, newlyweds, something to consider. If it's your first Christmas, maybe their family does a lot of gifts. Your family maybe just does the dirty Santa type thing. But there's conversations about the money to spend on each family's gifts.
Try to have the courage to live and spend within your means. Because here's the thing. Americans drive themselves into huge debt every year. And that assumption that because they're buying something expensive that they can afford it, totally false. And I think the safest thing that you can do and the smartest thing that you have to do is have the courage to stay within your means. And to be honest with you, if somebody's going to judge you because of that, so I say it, state it, and stick with it. And ultimately, you're going to feel better. You may not feel better in the short run. You're going to feel better in the long run.
In January, when you,
exactly.
You get your credit card.
That's exactly right.
You get that, get the credit card bill, and you feel better that you haven't overspent.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to mental health as well. Okay, you're going to be on the 4 coming up too. Can you give us a little preview of what y'all are going to be talking about?
Holiday stress, but also how do we keep ourselves from overextending to the point where we have just run ourselves into the ground?
Yeah.
Some tips to kind of know how to do that and to sort of know when you're reaching that edge around, I've done too much.
Yes, that would probably go back with what we were talking about, in the
Exactly.
first point about, you said you had to make the cookies for the class party. You said you had to do all this, and maybe take a step back and don't volunteer for so much.
Absolutely.
So, all right, Dr. Josh Klapow, thanks for being with us. We certainly
My pleasure.
appreciate it.